Let's bring in Lisa Evers here. We're learning right now, Lisa, that apparently bond has been denied.
Okay, that's
well, I don't know if that's getting it. Let's use this one.
Let's get Jeremy here.
Yeah, Jeremy, can you come back in here when you get a moment? So what we had been positioned for was an argument that because the jury found Sean Diddy Combs guilty only on the lesser of the charges, that there was a presumption that he might be able to go home. The judge even asked him at one point, I imagine you don't want to go back to MDC. He nodded vigorously. Right? Let's use this microphone. I'm not sure if that one works. And Jeremy, if you'll come in here
Jeremy.
too. Should we start with Jeremy's reaction?
Jeremy Saland is with us. He's a criminal defense attorney and former Manhattan prosecutor. And the bail, the news is that bail has been denied.
Yeah, that the judge...
So there is the law, the statute says in substance that bail would be denied, meaning that he goes in and stays in. There's not an exception. For example, there could be an exception where the prosecution says we consent, and there's other pieces to it as well. There could be a danger to somebody or not, but the bail being kept as it is not necessarily atypical because of the law, though one would believe the fact that he was not convicted of the top charge, and it's been a reduction, and people do walk free and come back and ROR'd.
Well, keeping the bail as it is means there's no bail.
Right. So he's remanded, he's held without bail. So this doesn't change the potential sentence, obviously, because it's still up to 10 years, but for the immediate gratification purposes of getting out, doing what he needs to do, and fighting this from the outside in terms of preparing for that sentencing, now it's been stripped.
And let me just add, this morning the prosecution was very adamant about wanting to have this extra time to present their argument to the judge, and seemed obviously they were disappointed with the verdict. It was very visible and very obvious, but they wanted to keep him behind bars, and they said, Your Honor, we need several hours to really get this whole argument together for you, and that's pretty stunning.
But again, I think you have to go back to what the law is and what it allows for, and generally speaking, barring some exception, the Bail Reform Act says you're staying, you're not just getting released. He was convicted of a crime. I think people, rightfully so, are disappointed and have questions from the public's perspective when you have such a horrific allegation that is not proven or substantiated beyond a reasonable doubt, and summarily, we're not talking about on the cusp. That's a pretty quick verdict that I think fooled many people, thinking that there might have been a sex trafficking conviction. He's walking scot-free in terms of any allegation of coercion, force, fraud, violence, but he's still in custody.
Okay, so Jeremy,
can we just ask Jeremy, was it a difficult decision for the judge legally?
I think the judge is not finding any exception in following the law, and that's why he's staying there. The hope from the prosecution, though they didn't, the defense, though they didn't raise it specifically in their letter to the court, was that, yes, there may be the Bail Reform Act, and that was what the prosecution relied on, said statutorily, you can't just let him walk. The prosecution was hoping, the defense was hoping that the judge would look past that and say, he's returned, he just shows that he can follow the court order, he's not going to flee, and he's not a danger to anyone specifically or the community at large.
And then let me ask you this, in terms of the appealing this decision, what's the process now that the defense will have to go through in order to appeal the judge's decision of no bail?
I would expect that he's not going anywhere anytime soon, appeal or not. I think that they're going to follow the judge. I haven't heard what the judge said, so it's hard for me to just speak on an island here. But based on the law as we know it, I think the judge has ample ground to stand on and make this decision.
Let me answer that. Our Sharon Crowley has been watching this and telling us right now the judge says that the government was correct that the detention is mandatory for a Mann Act conviction, what you're indicating, and the judge said that the limited exception to mandatory detention was not met. Sean Combs pointed to his duties as a father and a son, which we talked about, but that does not rise to the level of an appropriate exception, according to the judge.
Right, and to my point moments ago, that's what the law is. But we like to think that from the outside looking in, when someone has been charged with such egregious and horrible acts, and a jury of your peers says no so quickly, there should be a means to say you should be free, but there still is a conviction. The Mann Act qualifies. He's in custody. Whether that's a sign of the judge saying I'm going to harshly sentence him or not, we can't say, but let's not read into it. The judge is simply following the law, and this warrant does not warrant that 10 years that you're hearing about for each of the counts for Jane and
then Jeremy, remind us again about the Mann Act.
So the Mann Act does not involve coercion or force or anything like that. The Mann Act simply says that if you're bringing someone across state lines in substance, engaging in prostitution, that violates the law. I look at this case, not to really go too far off. This really, especially when you hear this verdict, should likely never have been in that courthouse. If anything, it should have been in that courthouse, meaning 100 Center Street or something similar, in a state courthouse for domestic violence, for abuse, for things that physical abuse and assaultive behavior, those types of things. But now we're here. It is what it is. But I think the prosecution really got humbled whether or not the judge is keeping Sean Combs in.
No, 100%. So now tonight he'll be spending the night in MDC.
It's hotter in there than it is out here, certainly for him. But there is now a horizon. The sun is rising for him. There is an out, and I'd like to think, based on the evidence and based on the finding of that jury, that out will be reasonable. And the defense said maybe 20 to 24 months. The prosecution is saying at least 50 to 60 months, even more. Where the judge falls, I don't know. But there's freedom for a guy who's looking at life in prison, which is unbelievable, whether he's in jail tonight or not.
And you told us that there's no minimum with the conviction, the prostitution conviction.
Correct, but there are guidelines, and the judges generally follow those guidelines. There's ability to move along them and go up or down. But I think we have to look at what the evidence is and remember that the prosecution can still bring out in sentencing, though you could not do that in a state court, all of his other allegations and the evidence there that was not supported by the jurors who said not guilty, because it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt at sentencing. It's not the same standard.
Right.
But do I think he's going to get 10 years? We've been wrong before. No, I do not. There is an out for him.
All right. And we'll continue watching this closely. And so that's it.
That's it for now. That's it for today.
Yeah, just to sum up, this has been a day of news on the Sean Diddy Combs case. First, the jury came back and rendered a not guilty verdict on the heavier charges of the indictment. And then there was this talk about whether or not he would be walking out of here. There were a lot of reasons why some people thought that might actually be the case. But at this point, we've just learned that the judge has denied the application for bail, which means instead of walking out a free man today, Sean Combs will have to wait. And the judge noted, we're told right now by Sharon Crowley, that one of the incidents of violence against the former girlfriend was in June of 2024, after Sean Combs knew that he perhaps was
under federal surveillance.
Right. So there are things in the bag, so to speak, that the judge is taking into consideration, that as people out on the street, maybe we were slower to get to, but the judge has made his decision. Sean Combs will not be seen on camera outside the courthouse today, at least not as a somewhat free man on bail. That's the latest from here at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. We go back to you guys.